is coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just the ghost of you and me. It's just the smoke and gasoline. It's just the ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers.
My name is James Hershey. Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. With my reflection I can't find. It's just the ghost of you and me. It's just the smoke and gasoline. It's just the
I know how to
ghost
do
of
it.
you and me. Of you and me. Don't let 'em take you away. Don't let 'em bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let 'em bring you down.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. Today's episode is going to be an interesting one. On this episode we're going to be talking about Black Eyed Kids. And not to be confused with the Black Eyed Peas, who is a halfway decent band. This is Black Eyed Kids. It's a urban legend slash paranormal kind of legend. It's a rather recent one as well. It doesn't go very far back in history. I mean, a lot of these things that we've covered on this show come from a long time ago. I mean, we've talked about Slender Man, who went all the way back to, I don't know, what it was, like the 1500s, old boy, something like that, where they had the sightings of them. This is kind of a recent one.
14, 15, somewhere around there.
The actual first report of the Black Eyed Kids was made by journalist Brian Bethel on January 16th, 1998. And the story that Bethel told was that two boys approached him while he was sitting in his car. And he said that they were like stylish, olive-skinned, like goth kind of kids. He said that the boys asked for a ride home and that they said that they were on their way to the movies, but that they forgot their money, so they needed a ride home. Bethel claimed that when he saw the kids, just something didn't feel right inside of him. You know, he kind of got that iffy feeling that you get sometimes when you're in danger or when something just doesn't seem quite right. And he said it went from that to he kind of became overwhelmed with fear. And it kind of triggered that old fight or flight kind of deal where he was panicking and he just knew something was absolutely wrong. But at the same time, even though he knew that something wasn't right and he had that feeling, he still had this other feeling that was fighting inside of him that he needed to help the kids and give them a ride. He knew that feeling that he was getting, that urge, wasn't natural. He felt like he was kind of being controlled in a way. And so he resisted and he wouldn't let him in the car, and that kind of pissed the boys off, and they got a lot more adamant about it with him, and they started getting pushy and demanding that they be allowed into the car. It was at this point that he noticed that their eyes were completely black. He described them as coal black, actually, and he got really, really scared. They got a lot more pushy at that moment because they kind of realized that the opportunity to actually get in the car with the guy was kind of slipping away because he had seen their eyes. He was really scared now and he's getting ready to bail. So they tried harder. They kept demanding, and finally he kind of bailed out on them and took off. There's a lot of cases where this has happened, I'm not going to go into every single case because I don't think that's really that constructive. The basics of the black-eyed kids is they come up to a person, okay, usually an adult, and they demand to either be let into your car or to, there's one case where they talk about where the kids wanted to go to the person's house and use their phone. So they're always wanting to go in your car or your house or something like that. They don't seem to be able to just enter your property on their own. They have to be invited in, because that's the whole game here that is in every one of these little stories about them, is that they're asking to be let in. They're asking you to invite them in. Otherwise they just stand there. They can't just enter. And they always act like they're in need of some kind of assistance, that they need your help with something. In every case, they have completely black eyes. In not every case, but in several cases, the people talk about how they feel like they're being mind controlled, like their will is not their own will anymore, that these black-eyed kids are actually trying to convince them to do something, and they're putting that feeling inside of them at the same time, if that makes sense, in almost every case. So I thought a fun little exercise here, since we don't really know a whole lot about the black-eyed kids. I mean, there's not a ton of information, because I mean, it only goes back to 98. I thought a fun little exercise would be to try to figure out what the hell these things are. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be completely and totally speculation, because we have no idea what these things are at this point in time. Nobody, to my knowledge, really does. So I figure we look at some of these stories and we try to figure out what these things could be. Okay, there's multiple possibilities here that I could think of. One, the most obvious one, if anybody's ever seen Supernatural or a bunch of other movies with creatures that have completely black eyes like that, would be a demon. That very well could be a possibility, but the problem with the demon idea is that a demon would not have to have permission to enter your home. They wouldn't have to wait to be invited. And a demon wouldn't sit there and ask for help and then not do anything to you unless you help them. You know what I mean? A demon would just attack you. So I think we could probably rule demon out. Although the completely black eyes, that's the first thing you think of. Another thing it could possibly be would be vampires. Because in the old vampire legends, you have them not being able to enter your home unless they're invited. In some vampire legends, the vampires have black eyes. Very few, but there are a few legends where they do. Usually, children are not vampires, as a general rule of thumb. Whether you go with the ancient lore of vampires, or whether you go with the more modern Twilight, Interview with a Vampire, movie vampires, or whether you go with, vampires in fiction, most times children are never made into vampires because they can't really take care of themselves in society. They can't pass for a normal person because they're a kid. In every case, these black-eyed kids are just that. They're kids. I would think that would kind of rule out vampires as being what these things are. Although the whole not being able to come into your house unless they're invited thing that is vampire all the way. You know what I mean? That's like one of the founding principles of being a vampire back in the day. But I don't think these things fit into that category.
Yep.
Another thing they could be is some kind of alien-human hybrid. I mean, we always hear about people getting abducted by aliens and taken up, and all kinds of weird stuff happening to them. In a lot of these eyewitness accounts, they talk about medical experiments being performed on them. They talk about sexual experiments being performed on them. It's not beyond the realm of imagination to think that possibly one of these people that got abducted, or many of these people that got abducted, became impregnated. If it was a woman that got abducted, and maybe the alien mated with her, and they had like a half alien, half human baby, and maybe that thing has got like completely black eyes. And the thing that makes me think of that is, if you think about the picture of the standard alien that we're used to seeing, the gray, okay? The gray has those big black eyes, and they're completely black. It's not black in the middle with white around. It's just completely black eyes. That matches what the black-eyed kids have. Now they don't have the big giant head that the grays have, and they're not gray, obviously. But who knows what kind of characteristics a hybrid child would have if it's between an alien and a human. Maybe the only physical characteristic it got was the eyes, and maybe it got the mental abilities as well. The whole mind control thing could very well be telepathy, because the gray aliens supposedly communicate through telepathy. They don't actually speak. They communicate mind to mind. So that would kind of fit in with this story as well, of a possibility of what they might be. I'm not going to rule that one out, because that almost seems kind of plausible to me. If these things exist, maybe that could be what they are. Another thing they could be is quite simply a hoax. Just a good story that somebody made up. Maybe they made up a great little story and they took little bits and pieces from different elements of horror and the paranormal and created a creature. They took the mind control thing. They took the can't enter a house unless they're invited from vampires. They took the black eyes from demons or from aliens, or who knows. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at things, I'm going to say probably fortunately, just to be a nice guy. But fortunately, there are no reports of anybody actually helping these children and then finding out what happens when you do. Most likely, it's not going to be anything good. I don't think that if the black-eyed kids come up to you and ask for your help and then you let them into your house, I don't think they're going to paint the house for you or redecorate in a pleasant way, or I don't think they're going to give you that big Publishers Clearinghouse check. I think most likely it's going to end very bloody and very nasty. And that very well could be the reason why we have no reports of anybody helping them. Not because nobody has, but simply because the people that have end up dying bloody, and they're not there to tell you what happened, so we just have an unsolved murder on our hands. Who knows? That could maybe account for some of the unsolved murder cases that we have, around the country and around the world. Is maybe those are some of those murders were people that actually helped these kids, and now they're in trouble. I think it's interesting that it's kids instead of adults. That kind of says something to me, because that's one thing that demons will always do, is they always lie to you, and they always pretend to be something they're not. They always pretend to be a child or some helpless person that needs your help. I mean, lots of times in possession cases and demonic hauntings and stuff, when you have a spirit contacting you, it will be pretending to be a child or pretending to be something that needs help. They always want your help with something. And a lot of times that turns out not to be what you think it is, but it turns out to be some kind of demonic presence. That's kind of one of their MOs. They always do that. They lie, and they always pretend to be weak and helpless and need help to sucker you in. Because that's something about human beings. We always want to help those who are less fortunate or those who are in need of assistance in some way, especially a woman or a child. If you're an honorable man, you're always going to do that. You're always going to try to help a woman or a child. So demons are aware of this, and they use that to lure you in and for you to let your guard down so that they can attack you. So I find that very, very interesting that these black-eyed kids are, in fact, kids, because that would fit the demon motif perfectly. Because what better thing to be than some lost kid out there who needs help? Some kid that just needs a ride home. And then you feel bad for the kid. You say, oh man, I can't let this kid stay out here. I mean, who knows what could happen to him? I'm going to give him a ride home. You let the kid in your car and he eats your face or whatever. You know what I mean? That's a terrible day. But I could absolutely see that happening. The only thing I think that screws up their little plan is them big old black eyes. You would think that they would have some way to hide that. Maybe put on some sunglasses or something so that you don't see them puppies. Because I don't know about anybody else, but the first time I see somebody and they have big old all black eyes, I'm not helping them. I'm probably going to knock the hell out of them and get out of there. You know what I mean? Because that's not normal. That's not normal at all. So those are a couple things that I think they might be. Oh boy, do you have any ideas of other things that I haven't mentioned that they might be, or anything to talk about with the black-eyed kids?
Actually, I do. Actually, there is reports of them doing things to people. And I actually read something that they got arrested, 2 of them. One was supposedly, looks like they're 16, one was 18. They arrested them, they had black eyes, they were trying to get into somebody's house, and they were walking around the streets. They had made too many, they were asking and bugging people, and then finally the cops could finally arrest them, but they were hanging around this town for a while, and then they arrested them, and then they disappeared. So we all know how that works. A lady said that she let them in the house and got sick, but survived. Other people have got sick by letting them in the house and have bad things happening to them. What I think they are personally is they're 3, this is my opinion, that they're lost souls, but because they always become as like a demon, like you were saying, like a, with black eyes, and they're always like in between the ages of what I was reading, 6 to 18. Because the funny thing about this story is I've heard this story about 4 years ago. My friend's a truck driver, and he was telling me stories about this. And one night we were having a couple drinks, and we were talking about, and he was telling me, I asked him about stories about, what's the craziest thing you ever seen truck driving? And he was telling me about the story he heard from this truck driver about the black-eyed kids, or children, whatever you want to call them. He told me all this stuff, so I already heard about this. They've been around since the 90s, and that's where it's, like you said, fairly new. Basically, it could be 3 things I think of. Either a vampire, because the whole let me in thing, or it's some kind of demon that when you let them in, that's why they have to ask permission. And that's the weirdest thing about this, because they ask permission. And there's hundreds of different reports, about thousands actually. So I don't think it's made up. I think some of it's hoax. I think the third thing they could be, is something we don't even know, something unexplainable, something new. Because they always ask to either how they do it. They come to your house, they'll stare at you for hours, and then they'll ask to use your phone or come in, or they'll come to your car window, or there's an instance where a man said he was in his car and one came up and he said no, and he could tell there was something odd about him. And when he rolled up the window, the guy started chasing his car. I don't know the whole thing about that. It's a really weird story. It's really intriguing. So that's all I could say about that one, James. I don't know.
The kids
There's 3 possibilities.
The kids
or
that disappeared.
A shadow person.
The kids that disappeared. Did they? Because I haven't read that. I didn't know anything about that. Did they disappear, like literally, like disappear in front of the cops? Like just 1 second they're there and 1 second they're not? Or did they just kind of escape, disappear? Like the cops had them and then they come back and they're gone?
What I read, one was 16, one was 18. The cops arrested them. They went to jail and then they disappeared, like the government took them and never was seen again. So the government took it away and it took them away. And
so they're probably in a lab somewhere getting
whatever
cut up
you want to call it, took them away, and that was the end of it. That's a very possibility, but there's another theory I have. The 4th one is the shadow people. And there's really no cutting them up because I don't think they're human beings. So or they're hybrid aliens. There's so many possibilities, but I don't know really. It's a really intriguing story. Like I said, it's just something crazy.
What if they're like time travelers or something, man? Or like interdimensional beings? What if they come from another dimension and they can only partially manifest here or something? And that's why they have to be invited in order to come all the way through. Or, I don't know, there's just so many really crazy things they could be. That's the thing with some of these, is you don't really know. There's not enough documentation on these creatures to even know if they actually exist. or if it's just some kind of thing. Because even, like, I don't know about that case where they were supposedly arrested that Old Boy was talking about, because I haven't read anything about that yet. So I will definitely look into that. But in some of these cases, you read about it, and then there's no actual documentation to back it up. Like, you might read that they're arrested, but then there's no actual arrest reports or no paperwork anywhere that you can find, no public record of them actually being arrested or anything like that. And then you check, in the town, and there's nothing, where the town where it's supposedly happened, and there's nothing in the papers about it. You go through, the whole year worth of papers, you can't find nothing. I mean, there's a lot of cases like that, and I'm not talking about with the black-eyed kids. I just mean in general, when you're dealing with a lot of these urban legend kind of things. A lot of them come from like creepypasta and stuff like that. When you're dealing with that kind of stuff, lots of times when you actually do the footwork on these things and you do the real research and you try to find the actual documentation that says, yes, we arrested these two guys and the government came and got them, or they disappeared, or whatever happened, then you can't actually ever find the paperwork. It's nowhere. It's not in the public record. There's nothing in the papers about it. There's no news reports about it. There's nothing. And those kind of points, and once again, I am not saying that the case that Old Boy is speaking of, that is what that is. I'm not saying that at all, because I hadn't even heard of that case, so I will have to research that. What it tells you when you try to actually find the documentation and you can't find anything, that tells you something, because if something like that was to actually happen in a town, okay, it would be on the news, it would be in the papers, there would be police records. If the cops arrest somebody, there's paperwork that has to be filled out. And that paperwork, in many cases, is public record, and you can actually access it, and you can see it, and read it for yourself, so that you can know what's going on. You know what I mean? And on some of these things, you can actually find that kind of stuff. And then on other things, you can't. And so we've done a lot of different subjects on this show. Some that are well documented throughout time, and some that are kind of more modern things. And we learn a lot sometimes. Like when we did Slender Man, we learned a great deal on that show. Because, see, I thought Slender Man was something that was just invented by creepypasta. But in doing the research, we found that it went back hundreds of years of reports of these things. This is not one of those cases that I know of. I could be wrong. But this seems to me to be a modern thing, something that's just starting up. You know what I mean? That is not saying that it's not real. Just because something has just started recently does not mean that it is not a real occurrence or a real thing. It just simply means that it's never been reported before. Or it's been reported and the people were thought to be crazy, or, on drugs or something like that, because you have some of those things as well. But I tend to like the alien theory more than anything else. I think that the alien theory is probably the most plausible, because you have no idea what's going to happen when you mix the genetics of an alien species and a human species. So when you have a creature that looks like it's human, with the exception of the big black eyes, and that does match the grays, and then you have the mind control, like I was saying earlier, that to me is very, very interesting. And we're just starting to learn a lot about other dimensions and stuff through science now. There's a lot of scientists that are working on the parallel universe theory and working on interdimensional theories and all kinds of very, very interesting things. And so we don't really know a whole lot yet about how many other universes there are, or how many other dimensions there really are. And we don't really know the rules about travel between them or anything yet. So there's so many things. I mean, that's one of the things they think Slender Man might have been, was an interdimensional being. So that's kind of interesting to me too, that now we have another creature that's just starting to come over. It seems to me that if these things are real, that adds to the group of things that are just starting up, that are starting to make appearances. And I think that points to something larger as well. What is going on that we're having more and more sightings of these things? We see that with the Nephilim as well. is there's beginning to be a lot more sightings of Nephilim now than there was before. It makes me wonder if we're coming to some kind of end time scenario where a lot of these hidden things are starting to come out, or if it is something to do with a whole nother ball of wax. Everybody was so worried in 2012 because of the Mayan calendar that the world was going to end. But the thing that not a lot of people realize about the Mayan calendar was it wasn't foretelling the end of the world. That's what the media said. That's what a lot of people said who didn't know what they were talking about, that have no idea about the Mayan calendar or the ancient Mayans. What it actually was the end of an age. That's what that calendar marked. And the beginning of the new age. So we are now in a new age. Now, whether that new age is going to manifest itself in geopolitical terms with, this whole movement around the world against globalism and for nationalism and everything like that, or whether it is going to manifest itself in a whole new awareness of creatures and beings that some of which we didn't even know existed, and some that we only believed were legends before, that we thought were fiction. We didn't think this stuff was real. And more we're finding that a lot of these things that we once believed did not exist absolutely do exist. I point to several different creatures that have been discovered that at one time were believed to be mythical. Look at the silverback gorilla down in the Congo. That was a creature that was believed to be legendary and not real until they found it. Look at the coelacanth. The coelacanth is a sea creature that was believed to have gone extinct millions of years ago until one washed up on the coast of Madagascar. And then they realized, hey, this thing's still out there. The giant squid is another one. The giant squid was believed to just be something out of legends. It was thought that the giant squid was not a real creature, that it was just something that was a fisherman's tale, something that was just one of those old monsters that you read about in the old books and stuff, but that wasn't real until one washed up. And then they found one with a deep sea camera, and they actually filmed it from a submersible swimming right up to the camera, so they could actually see a living giant squid, which they believed not to be real. There's many different cases of things like that. See, the misconception is that we've already discovered everything. The misconception is that there's no more like mountains to climb. There's no more big discoveries left, and that's just not true. The reality of the situation is there's still a lot to learn. When you go into the Amazon rainforest, you find things you would never believe. I read an article one time about they put this big leather strap around the trees, and they hook it up to a machine that shakes it, and a bunch of insects and stuff fall out of the trees, and they find new species all the time when they do stuff like that. And so there's a lot of stuff that we don't realize is real, that actually is. Old Boy sent me a video here of the actual black-eyed children that were arrested. And it's got some really neat pictures of actual black-eyed kids. Does this show the actual mugshots, Old Boy, of the black-eyed kids?
I think it does. I only watched some of it. I know it talks about what happened. Like I said, just listen to it after the show, because I think it's like 8-9 minutes long. So we wouldn't have enough time. But yeah, I think it does. I think that's like a made-up picture for this. How they do everything. But I think what I saw, I think it might be the girl. I don't know. Like I said, I just looked stuff up about the black-eyed kids, and that was one of the things. It's about 2.5 minutes long, actually. Sorry to say that, but that was the thing you need to read about that. how they got arrested, and it explains the whole story about, I guess they were going around this neighborhood and they were bugging people, but the cops can't arrest you for that. Well, I guess they kept going to people's houses and stuff, and that's why they got them for breaking in, going in people's property. So they finally got to arrest them. And the story goes, they went to jail, and then they took mug shots, and then supposedly went to jail, and then that was it. They said that the government came and took them away or something, and that was the end of it. But they had straight black eyes. It was crazy.
Yeah, this one here, it has them in a hotel, and they were going around trying to get into people's rooms and stuff, trying to get people to let them in the rooms, and they ended up finding them hiding in a I guess what would you call it, the maid closet, something like that, the place where they keep the cleaning supplies, that closet. Yeah. And they found them there and arrested them. It said they're being held in protective custody and not being allowed in interviews, is what it says. But like you said, it was just that one picture, and that picture looks like, it looks to me like a Photoshop picture, to be honest with you. That's something we've always said on this show, is that if something is real, we're going to say it's real. If something is a hoax, we're going to say it's a hoax. And if we don't know, we're going to say we don't know. I don't know, but I'm saying, just based on that video, I'm saying that's probably not true, because it looked kind of hokey. There was no actual pictures of the real people that were arrested. There was no pictures of the actual place where they were arrested or anything like that. It was one of those videos where they show stock photos of black-eyed kids that were photoshopped, and they show old historical photos, but they don't actually show anything about the actual story that they're supposedly reporting on. So I would say probably most likely that video is one of those things that's just put on YouTube by somebody looking to make a little bit of money, and trying to cover something that they don't really know much about. We see that quite a bit in this field, unfortunately.
I just sent you another one, and these are actual pictures, so you might like that one. I sent it to you. It shows them with black eyes, man, and that's why I said I don't think they're alien. I think they're some kind of cursed, like they're cursed or something. That's what it looks like to me. That's all I could say. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what the hell they are. I think those pictures are probably Photoshop, because they probably don't really have the picture, but I guarantee the story might be true, because protective custody means the government came in and got him. We both know what that means. So I sent you another video. So there's all kinds of videos on them. That's why I said go look it up on the internet, and you'll find out where they're all at.
The problem with
YouTube.
The problem with videos that don't have any actual pictures or evidence is you have somebody that is telling you a story, but you don't have any proof of the story. You know what I mean? And you could tell any story you want, and it very well may be a true story, but if you have no documentation at all to back it up, then there's no way to really verify that it actually happened. And I mean, that's one thing that I always try to do whenever I'm talking about a subject, is I try to actually find reliable sources and stuff that I can actually look at and say, okay, this is definitely something that I believe happened. I just don't put, and I'm not saying that this thing didn't happen, but what I'm saying is I don't put a lot of stock in YouTube videos that don't have any sources. You know what I mean? That don't have any actual footage or actual pictures of the events that they're talking about. Because I've seen a lot of people that make YouTube videos, and they take the same couple images off of Google Images, and they just tell a story and put those images in the video. And if you watch, I mean, you see that with the Skinwalkers a lot. If you watch all the Skinwalker videos, you'll see the same couple pictures over and over again in all these Skinwalker videos, and then they're just basically telling a ghost story. You know what I mean? They're telling like one of those campfire stories while they show the pictures. And I guarantee you'll find out with the Black-Eyed Kids, you find out with Slender Man, you find out with a lot of these things that you have the same couple pictures that are used over and over and over again while people say all kinds of stuff. I mean, this reminds me of of when we did that show on dragons. Remember, and there's that one video of all the different mythical creatures and how ridiculous most of those were. I mean, they were obvious fakes. That's what a lot of these YouTube videos remind me of. But it's kind of it's one of those things where you don't know, because that does not mean.
Remember that one video with the thing from.
That does not mean that black-eyed kids don't exist. Just because some guy in his basement made a video, and doesn't have any proof, that doesn't mean that the whole black-eyed kids phenomenon isn't real. And that's the problem. I mean, there's blessings to the internet and there's downfalls to the internet. The blessing is that it makes research a lot easier, because you can really find a lot of that source material without having to travel to the town and actually go to the library and look through old editions of the paper and all that kind of stuff, that you can just kind of do a search and find it online in most cases. But the downfall of it is there's so much crap that you have to root through in order to get to anything real. You know what I mean? To actually prove something. And I think that's the problem with having something like Black-Eyed Kids that is so recent. And now, I mean, recent is a relative term, because we're talking 19 years that the story has been around, basically. So you got almost 20 years. And that is a decent amount of time, but it's not a lot of time in comparison to a lot of these other creatures and phenomenon that we've studied, I mean, some of these things go back hundreds of years. So just having something that's almost 2 decades old, you're just not going to have enough real evidence to make any kind of real determination on it, unless you get lucky and you catch one of these things on camera. But even then, the only thing we have to go on is that they have all black eyes. And that's easily done with contacts. I mean, you can get a contact lens that you can put in your eye very cheaply that will make your eyes look like they're all black. And now, I'm not saying that that's what this is, because it would be kind of difficult to have a hoax on a large scale like that. But it's very possible that a couple kids had black contacts and put them in and was goofing around, and that's where the story started. And it's just kind of got carried away from there, because you had a lot of people that started doing these creepypasta kind of videos on it and just telling stories that either they made up or they heard somewhere else. And a lot of them, I would say probably most of them, aren't true. But it very well could have started that way. It could be just a complete and total hoax. Or it could be something that is real that we just don't know what it is, or that we don't understand yet. I mean, that's kind of my thinking on it. What do you think, old boy?
I think, like I said, the problem I have with the contact lenses, it started in the 90s. And actually, I've heard it all the way to 92. So what I've been reading, it's actually almost 30 years. Or about, no, not 30, about 25. 90s, whatever. So back then, I don't even think they had those kind of lenses. And if they did, it was really expensive. I don't see kids having those. Especially they're supposedly six years old. That's the only issue I have with that. And there's more. I sent you another video of what I was studying. But I've heard about this before I even knew about it on YouTube. About 4 years ago, I told you it was an urban legend with truck drivers. So I only started hearing about 4 years ago, actually. But just because it's newer, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, like you were saying. I just think there's not enough evidence to know what the hell these are, if it's even real. But it's impossible to say it's fake, because it's been happening since the 90s. So it could have been possibility people have faked it and pretended to be something, or, how people exaggerated, like the clown thing. I think that has happened, but the original stuff, I don't know. I don't really know. I've heard it even could go to the 60s. So I'd have to read more up about this. Like I said, this is a very intriguing story. I heard about it years ago. a couple years ago from my friend, and I've always been intrigued by the story. It's really interesting because I don't know what the hell these creatures are, and I don't know where they came from, and I hope to God they never come to me at night because I'm punching them in the face.
Then they would be black-eyed kids. You give them a black eye. See, the funny thing is that we just don't know.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
probably
mean?
would. So would you.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, I would. Here's the thing, though, right? It's very possible that this whole thing could be based on either a hoax or it could be based on a real encounter. Most likely, if it was based on a real encounter, then you've had one or two real encounters, very few, and a whole lot of made-up stories. That's how usually these things work. That's kind of the point I was making about something having hundreds of years of documentation as opposed to a relatively new phenomenon. Is a lot of these things don't happen very often. They're kind of rare. So if you have a larger time period of sightings, then yes, you're still going to have a lot of fakes and a lot of made-up stories and a lot of exaggerations, but that extended amount of time gives you a lot more actual sightings that cannot be explained any other way. That was kind of the point I was trying to make, is that with a newer phenomenon, you're going to have only one or two actual sightings most likely, and the rest of them are going to be garbage, especially in the time of YouTube, because I mean YouTube's a really cool thing, and you can learn about almost any subject on YouTube. It's wonderful. I mean, you can have people that really know what they're talking about that will make very good instructional videos on just about everything. But along with that, you also have people who are only on YouTube to try to make some money, so they just throw together quick videos and they just make up stories, or they go right on creepypasta or something like that, and they literally just read exactly what it says on creepypasta in a video and put up a bunch of stock pictures of photoshopped eyes. You have a lot of that going on too, and that's kind of what I was talking about. I'm not saying that this did not happen. I'm not saying that black-eyed kids do not exist, because I have heard a lot about them, and I've heard about them from people that I actually respect in the field that believe that there's something to this. I'm just kind of trying at this point, kind of playing a skeptic a little bit, because I guess because there's not a whole lot of actual documented proof. There's not a lot of stuff that I can look at and concretely say this is a real occurrence. Whether it was a black-eyed kid, or whether it was somebody with contacts, or whether the light just hit their eyes in a certain way and the person was mistaken, at least I can tell you that this event actually happened. There's not a lot of things like that as far as the black-eyed kids go. There's a lot of secondhand stories. There's a lot of this happened here, but there's no real pictures or no real footage that you can look at and say, oh, well, that did happen there. Look, you can see it happening. It's not like Sasquatch. It's not like Nessie. It's not like a lot of these other things where whether you believe the footage or not, there's actual footage that you can look at, and then you can determine, okay, is this real or is this a hoax? This is one of those things where the overwhelming majority of this is just stories that you have to listen to and then try to decide if you believe that actually happened or not. There's very little actual documentation, if any, about black-eyed kids, and that, in a way, that makes this even more intriguing, because it becomes a mystery at this point, where you're like, man, this isn't as easy as just looking at a piece of footage and saying, okay, do I believe that's a man in a monkey suit, or is that a real creature? This is something where you have to say, is this something that's even happening, or is it a hoax? Or if it is happening, what in the world could it possibly be? And then that opens up so many different avenues and different possibilities of things that it could be, and it really makes it an interesting exercise. So I just wish, and I guess this is what everybody in the paranormal field wishes, is that there was a little bit more evidence, a little bit more proof that I could look at, that I could actually make a real determination on whether these things exist or not. But like I said, I have heard about black-eyed children and black-eyed kids from people in the field that I do actually respect and that don't make up crap. So there's enough there that made me say, yeah, let's do this show, because there is something there. Now, what it is, I don't know. Our listeners actually voted on this show and wanted this show done, so we did it. But also, I have heard from people that I respect that these things do exist, so there is something there. And we might do sometime in the future an update show on black-eyed children and actually try to get one of these experts in the field onto the radio show to kind of tell you more about it. Because this is one of those situations where we've done some research and we've tried to figure this out, but as far as I can see, there's just not enough to be able to make a definitive answer on this. If I did not have people that I respect telling me that this is something that's actually happening, then I'm just going to be honest with you, I would say this is a hoax. I would say there's no way this is real. But the fact that there are people that are very respected in the paranormal field that are telling me that there is something to this, for me personally, I'm going to say this is plausible. I'm not saying that it's a definite creature. I'm not saying that it actually exists. I'm not saying that it's really happening, but I'm going to say that it's plausible. That I think would be my ruling on it. What do you think, old boy? Would you say it's plausible, or would you say that it's a hoax, or would you say that it's definitely going on?
I think it's possible. I don't ever say 100% anything is. I think I'm about 65-35 on it. I more believe it's probably real. I think it's been exaggerated, but that's, what I've heard, and people that I've known also in that field have said they are real and have dealt with them. So, I mean, I don't know. Honestly, it's impossible to say anything doesn't exist just because you can't see it. I would say this one may be a little bit of a hoax too. There's a possibility on that too. So honestly, I wouldn't rule out anything on this thing. So I'd say possible, but not 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you, because we just don't have enough information, you know what I mean, to make any kind of real judgment on it. One thing I would be very interested in is if you know somebody that has actually dealt with these things, that's in the field, I would definitely be interested in getting in contact with that person and having them on the show, because I think that would be very interesting for us, and I think that it would really do a service for our audience to be able to hear from an actual expert in the paranormal field that has actually dealt with these things. Because I've had absolutely no dealings with black-eyed kids. I've heard from people that they exist, but I don't know anybody that's actually ever seen one or met one or actually dealt in person with one. So if you have that source, man, I would definitely say let's get in touch with them and let's try to get them on the show to talk about this, because that would be the kind of evidence I'm talking about, a first-hand account of somebody that's actually respected that I could turn to and say, okay, if this guy says that he's seen it, and he's done this, and this in the field, and I respect his opinion, then I'm going to go ahead and say that I believe that this is happening. So we got about 7 minutes left, so why don't you go ahead and give your shout-outs and everything.
I want to give a shout-out to my dad. Hopefully he feels better, and all our fans and the people who are listening to us. Everybody, I love you guys. All the people we know, love you. We're trying to figure out all this stuff and seeing if this stuff's real. So that's what we try to do, and give great topics and popular topics to talk about. Other than that, I love you guys.
This has been a very interesting show for me, because this is one of those shows that shows you that we don't always have to prove 100% that something exists. It's okay sometimes if you just don't know. Because in the paranormal field, you're going to have that happen to you. You're going to have times when you either can't prove that something exists, or that something happened, or that there's just simply almost no evidence at all to find. That's one of the things I think that makes the paranormal field so interesting and such a great field to work in, is sometimes you just don't know, and that's okay. Now, sometimes we do these shows and we can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that one of these creatures exists. Sometimes we do these shows and the exact opposite happens, to where we can't prove that it exists, and sometimes we even prove that it doesn't exist. That's rare because it's hard to prove that something doesn't exist. In order to prove something doesn't exist, you literally have to be able to say, I know it doesn't exist because I have looked every single place in the world and it's not there. I looked in the closet, I looked in the kitchen, I looked at the neighbor's house, I went over to Uncle Bob's, checked underneath his couch, I went down to Zimbabwe, wasn't there. South America, couldn't find it anywhere. I have looked at every single square inch of this planet, and it's nowhere to be found. It doesn't exist. That's literally what it takes to be able to actually prove definitively that something does not exist. Because it's very hard to prove a negative. But sometimes you can get a pretty good idea that what you're dealing with is either a made up story or simply a smokescreen. Sometimes that happens. I don't really honestly feel that the Black Eyed Children is a completely made up story, and I don't feel like it is a smokescreen. I think that there is some truth here. Now, exactly how much that truth is, I don't know. How much of this story is based on reality, actual sightings, and how much of this is a scary camp story? Something that you tell kids at a sleepover to scare them. How much of this is somebody just taking advantage of a few real sightings and coming up with fake stories to get views, or fake stories to have content or to scare people? How much of this is that? Once again, I don't know. I think that there is some of that here in this tale. But you find that in everything, really, in the paranormal. But I think this one, a good percentage of the stories that come out about the Black Eyed Children are false. But I do believe that there is some truth here. Like I said, I've had people that I actually respect in the field that have told me that these things exist, and I tend to put a little bit of weight into their opinions. So I'm not going to say that they don't exist. But this is one of those shows where we just honestly don't know for sure. And like I said, that's okay. That's one of the great things about staring into the abyss. We're not going to lie to you. If we don't know, we'll tell you we don't know. And on this one, we just don't know. But it was a fun topic to talk about. I will continue to research this. And like Old Boy said, we will probably do another show on Black Eyed Children at some point in the future when we have a little more information for you, when we have more evidence, when we can get closer to that definitive answer we're looking for. I hope you guys enjoyed this show. This is a little different than some of the other shows that you guys have heard, because on our other shows, we have a ton of evidence, and lots of times we're answering questions that people have been trying to find answers to for a long time. We're either proving or disproving things. On this show, it was really speculative, and sometimes it's fun to do that. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please check out the YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. It's where you can find all the old shows and all the current shows. And we also do little side videos and all that kind of stuff. Completely free for you guys. You don't have to pay anything for it, so please take advantage of that and enjoy it. That's why I put so many hours into it, trying to give you some good content that you will enjoy. So please do so. Also, please check out my novels. I'm a horror author. I wrote the Legion series. It's I Am Legion, The Surrogate of Souls, and The Rise of the Revenant. I also have a novel that's named called The Wind Spirits. You can get them on Amazon, Books A Million, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, all the bookstores. They definitely have them on their website. Some carry them in the store, some don't, but please check those out. And just thank you guys for listening, and thank you for all the love and support. And until I speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. We love you. Bye-bye.